Thank you very much to Glenn L. for being one of my newest patrons who is helping to keep the channel going for as long as it can, and I am very grateful for that. If you would like to do the same for as little as $1 a month to keep the lights on here, go over to patreon.com/TJOmega. Thank you very much, and now we review. Earthrise is upon us. As I speak, this toy line is now available nationwide at Targets everywhere, and I know it's nationwide because I actually found one in person, and my area is always the last anywhere to get these toys in stock. So hey, we're going to review the only one I've been able to find so far, Ironworks, who is simultaneously the most boring and the most interesting to talk about. Most boring because he's not really a legacy character. He's not really based on anything. But he is. That's what makes him interesting. He's based on an old Micromaster base, which is a weird little origin point for a brand new character. Though technically the Micromaster he came with was also called Ironworks. It's a very weird thing. They turned a base into a robot. So this is something of a unique little thing. Being basically a micro-sized version of a city former. So this is like the weaponizers, or if I'm remembering what, I might be misremembering the name because there's so many little tiny lines now. But the weaponizers of Siege, yeah, it's the same idea. Parts that all join together into different modes and then combine together and to make a robot. So let's see how this one turned out, because it works a little bit differently than they did. As we see, he is now currently in a tower formation. This is one of Ironworks' original formations, based loosely on it, though we are missing a windmill here. How dare you, Hasbro? I want my windmill. But what we have is, a decent little tower, just for a little scouting platform kind of thing. I do like the scoop here in the center, though I wish it was a little bit wider, because if I try to put a Micromaster in its place, it's not quite wide enough to actually stand on as like a lookout platform or something. I think it fits on top just fine. That's okay. And then you have like the gap in the back, which is too short for these guys, but you can run a little Micromaster up in there in vehicle mode and just kind of have him store away. So there's a little bit of play value, but for the most part, this is just an alternate thing to do with the kit, and it helps create... Daddy-O got stuck. So it lets you create some of his original G1 forms, and that's a nice thing, especially if you have more than one of these and you can start cobbling them together. So let's get this into something a little bit more familiar, because there's not a whole lot of play value to this mode. We can get to a little bit more if we have this guy in his standard base mode, which is not terribly difficult to get him into. I say that as this will probably take me, an hour and a half. So that's basically how your weapon, or call them weapon masters still. This is actually a modulator, if I remember the terminology right, because they haven't pushed it very heavily yet. Yeah, lots of parts, lots of little things. One thing you're going to notice as I play with this toy, a bunch of these little ramps with these hinge connections. These are present on a lot of different Transformers from the previous toy lines, all the way through Titan's Return, and they are compatible with all of them. So you can hook these up to your Titan class figures, some of your Leader class figures, and all the ramps will work, so you start building your own little cities and things. So that's kind of where the toy line started. I like that there's some connections to the past. I don't know why. I'm just letting you stare at a pile of parts when I need to get this show on the road. Literally, this show needs to keep moving. So we plug this yellow brick into here. That forms that component. This is a little bit tricky because that yellow makes that very tight, but it will connect on. I think I've actually got this backwards. This is... Ow! Sheesh. All right. There we go. Because that has to tuck away into that little crevice right there. All right, that out of the way, we can fold this back up into its to its little configuration, put that peg away. What you're also going to see on this guy are a lot of extra pegs and a lot of extra ports in order to connect extra things to weapons, other figures. If you want to connect the weaponizers onto him to bulk them up, you can do that too. You know, it's an imagination gimmick. So you do whatever you want. I actually do need that peg out now that I think of it for this part. All right. So that goes there. That pegs back on to here. We need the hook. Boom. And then this piece is supposed to attach onto here. There's a tiny little hole just to make sure it is synced up correctly, as I noticed that might be horribly out of frame there. I apologize, but it's not terribly hard to figure out how this guy goes together. And then this to give him a little bit of extra stability in the back. And then we finish off by connecting one of the ramps. And just like that, we've got a tiny little base now. He's a bit of an oil platform of a design with this big crane arm overhead and a bunch of little ramps that kind of go off into nowhere. But hey, it's the start of something that should be cool eventually. Right now, he's just a little bit thin, a little bit, you know. But for the most part, he's nice and solid in this mode all the way around. Extra little stability thanks to that stand really helps in this case. You can see ports, all these different parts. You're going to be able to connect these things up so many different ways thanks to all these universal connection points. There's a lot here just for play value and imagination and construction rather than just being a thing like a car that just rolls around. So it's going to be one of those toys where the more you get, the more you can do, thus the more valuable they become as the collection grows. But for now, he is a little bit dull on his own. You can ride the little Micromasters up and then realize they have no room to turn around, so you have to lift them up anyway. But, you know, it gives them a little bit of base functionality. And like I said, he's backwards compatible with some of your old toys, so you might want to start connecting things together and seeing how they work. After all, you do have the extra ramp here, which connects here. Believe you can get it on the side as well. So you got a lot of places that could potentially go and could potentially combine onto other things. So it leaves it to your imagination. Basically, that's how valuable the toy is. What does your brain do with Ironworks? What my brain's going to do with him is put him into the robot mode so we can get one look at the one mode that he didn't have in G1. Now, this is so part formery, and that's a little bit, it's a little bit disappointing, but at this point, I think we just kind of know that War for Cybertron is going to do that to us. There's always going to be a deluxe every wave or so that's going to be doing this, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, because honestly, it's an interesting little play pattern. It gives you some variety in deluxes. And let's be honest, it's kind of where we're getting some of our new characters in the Earthrise that so far we haven't gotten a lot of, as we've been very G1 centric in the last few years. All right, so that block unfolds, fold that peg down. This is pretty much good to go. However you want, it's pretty much just there. It's ready. Yeah, we'll do it that way. Head off, head flips up from the block, rotate around, and that pretty much leads us to the assembly portion of this toy. The two pegs and sockets that work together there, and then shore him up by placing another right on his back. That stores his extra panel away. Peg in there, peg in here. And then what to do with this, because it can be a gun, it can be two guns, or it can be a smokestack off the side. So he still looks a little bit like the little oil platform thing he was going for in his base mode. But either way, it's a quick little assembly to get him into the robot mode. And the robot mode is appropriately a big, heavy looking machine. The dark tones and construction themed colors actually does a good job of conveying what he was and gives him, you know, a bit of a unique look considering we've had so many Transformers over the years. Looking over at his head design, again, we have something completely new as far as the sculpt goes. I'm just realizing I'm using a different camera for this to test if the audio is any better. And I did not realize the autofocus was going to do that wobbly thing. I will fix that. I apologize to anyone getting motion sickness over this guy. But you can see the faces, you know, it's not a bad looking face, but I really wish that that visor was a different color than his mouth plate. That really, really hurts it a little bit. Gives me a hard time to actually tell where his face begins and ends. And that is a little bit unfortunate for a new character where I already kind of have a hard time with his identity. So, yeah, I like the color combinations. I will tell you this. Every bit of paint, or every bit of yellow you see on there is paint. Which, it looks a little bit ridiculous because, like, his entire forearm, his entire lower arm's been painted, his entire right arm's painted. I actually found out, I've been finding out over the years that sometimes that's just cheaper to just dunk entire parts into paint and instead of painting like little individual bits because it doesn't require a paint mask or anything. This does lead to a few issues with him, and they are not helped by apparent QC issues that kind of plague the toy. If you, nothing bad, I'll say that, I'm being a little bit unfair. But you see that black line? That's where I had to scrape out some excess plastic and some excess built up paint so I could actually peg something into that socket. That's apparently going around on this guy, so you might have to do a little bit of modding to give him the most for his modularness. I'm not sure that's a word. It's late. So, what can we do with him as this? Well, we can look at the articulation, since we already know his gimmick is being a base. Universal shoulders, always nice. Double jointed elbow on this side, and just a 90 degree on this side. So, nothing really going there. Neck, ball jointed, has a little bit up and down, but it's mostly all left and right. The waist does wiggle from side to side. It does not have a proper rotating waist because it's connected to the back panel. So you get a little bit of a waist rotation, not much of one though. Universal at the thigh, thighs rotate. So good hips, good thighs, good knee bend. Really good knee bend for something that does not look like he's going to do any major action poses anytime soon. And then you get an ankle tilt as well. I do like that they have so many little universal functions on these toys, but they still make room to actually have like really good articulation. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick that into his hand so he has a bit of weaponry going for him. Get him into some nice little posing. I will say, if I have one issue with the actual physical design of this toy, I really wish this hook could hinge forward. It feels a little bit weird that no matter what, it's coming down like this. And not only does that mean that he's kind of defying gravity in some poses, because his hook is not hanging right, but it also means that the hook doesn't really play in as a weapon or as a hand of any kind. It just kind of looks, I don't know, like it's not doing anything, because it's really not. Needed a hinge. Beyond that, everything, he's a nice and solid bot, and then, yeah, there's really nothing left to say. That's what makes up Ironworks. Yeah, so a lot more focus on the base mode for this review rather than the robot mode, because that's really what it is about. You know, there's a lot you can do with it. In fact, I'm going to sneak a picture in here of what I came up with, which is something of an excavation mode, some like a hover demolitions vehicle of some kind. I don't know, I kind of liked it, and it shows you what you can do with a little bit of imagination and a little bit of time with these. I actually had a lot of fun just taking him out of the box and ignoring the instructions and just doing whatever I could figure out with Ironworks. So this is going to be one of those that is purely up to your imagination and how much you are willing to buy in order to improve him. I could kind of see myself getting more than one of these if I find them on clearance, just for the sake of building up bigger and better constructions with him. And, you know, that prospect of that old MicroMaster city that you could build as a kid is going to be realized in the new Earthrise line, and that's gonna be really dangerous for my wallet. So yeah, like I said, kind of the most dull, but also the most interesting to talk about. I think he's fun.